Hello and welcome to Janette's TV and Janette's TV podcast. I'm your host, Janette Burke, and today we're talking pay equity and football with Maggie Murphy, who happens to be the former head of general manager of the Lewes FC team for women, football team for women, and is now the CEO of Lewes FC. And she's going to be here talking to us about how the FC got started way back in the late 1800s as a football club, and now it's the only football club ever to introduce pay equity in a campaign that ensures equal pay for women and men in the football sport. And so we'll be back in one moment to talk with Maggie about this and how it's changing football. And we're so excited to have her. We'll be right back after this short break. So I want to remind everyone that if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to be notified of all episodes. You'll never miss another one again. We also want to remind you that we have a way you can support us as we continue to bring you the best content and the best guests that we can on an array of lifestyle and celebrity issues throughout the pandemic. And we have a Patreon account, and actually no donation is too big or too small. The link for the Patreon account, which you can check out and also see the perks that we will give you for your support, can be found in the description box below. And there's another way you can help us. You can opt to purchase Janette's TV and Janette's TV podcasts, premium quality sweatshirts and t-shirts like this one. And you can get it with the JTV logo and tagline like this, or you can also choose an inspirational saying made by me and one of my guests in a previous episode. Comes in your size and color of choice as well. And all orders include shipping and handling and are conveniently sent right to your front door. So if you'd like to learn more and actually place an order, that link will also be in the description box below. So now we're going back to our episode. We're going to start talking with Maggie. And Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from Sussex, England. I'm sure there's a bit of a time change. And I want to start the interview actually with us talking a little bit about the history of FC and women in football, because I think that there's probably going to be a lot of people watching this interview that have no idea just what went on with women and men and in football, and that, you know, there's some discerning facts that basically state that back as early as 71, the FC was created as a club, and women had been playing football until around 1891. And then in the 1920s, I believe it was 1927, somehow it was deemed that it was unacceptable for women to be involved in football. It was stated that it was against their demure, their body types, and totally not accepted as a ladylike thing, which then led the sport to be much more male dominated. So I'd like you to take over and sort of talk a little bit more about the history and how football came back to women, and actually what makes the sport even appealing to women and appealing to you, because you were also involved in it.
Sure thing. Thanks, Janette, for having me as well, to be able to talk to your audiences as well. It's a really great thing for me over in England to be able to do that. So yeah, the quick history is that women have actually played football for quite a long time. They did start in the 1800s. They carried on playing a little bit in the early 1900s. The key thing was that in the World War, that was when the men moved away. They were fighting in the war, and that provided a gap in the history. So what happened at that time was that lots of women who were working in the factories, for their leisure time, they started taking up football again. In fact, they were so popular that they used to play in front of crowds of 30 or 40,000 people. This was way back in the 1900s, maybe 1918, 1919. Now, the challenge was that they started being able to raise quite a lot of money. So they were very good at fundraising. People loved to come and watch. They raised a lot of money. And that, when the men came back from war, that was seen to be a little bit threatening. I think the men wanted their space again. And there was a 15-minute meeting that took place at the Football Association in London. And in that 15 minutes, they decided that for gynecological reasons, it was not suitable for females to play football. So all these women who had been playing, all these crowds that had been watching women's football up until 1921 disappeared overnight. They were banned from playing in FA tournaments in official pitches. So that was the history. That ban lasted 50 years until 1971, but actually there was no investment put into women's football until the early 1990s. So you're looking really at almost a 70-year block on women being able to take part in football. I think there was two key impacts for women. When we look at on the TV right now, we're seeing a lot more visibility for women in football, but there were two key impacts. One was there was no resources put into women's football. And so the technical level or the investment was just not there. There's 70 years to catch up. But the other consequence is a little bit more interesting, and that's around stereotypes. It's kind of easy to turn on a tap and start investing. It's very difficult to start changing stereotypes. And for 70 years, women were told that they should not be in the football environment. They should not play. It wasn't legitimate for them. And as a result, women in England were kind of othered, not allowed into a space. And that stereotype is the thing that we're trying to challenge, I guess, now in the way that we talk with our daughters, with trying to open up opportunities in schools, trying to tell school teachers that they should offer football to girls as well as boys. All those things are still at the very beginning of change. So that's the potted history, I guess, in England of the social context. For us as a football club, so Lewes Football Club was set up in 1885, very, very long time ago. We've been playing football for now 137 years. The women's team only started in around the 1990s. And there was two key moments for us as a football club. The first one was after the financial crisis. The global financial crisis had a huge impact on a tiny little football club in England. And that's because up until then, the football club was traditionally run and owned. There were two businessmen, they put all their money into the club, financial crisis hit, they went bust. The club nearly fell apart, but a small number of people came together and said, you know what, let's rip up this traditional style of running a football club. We don't want to rely on just one or two rich people. We want to open it up so that anyone can own a part of it. We democratize the ownership model. So now we have 2,300 owners around the world, including people in Canada who are owners of the football club, and they buy in a much smaller amount, but every year they pay £50, so $70, I guess. And for that, they are taking part in the democratic process around the club. And as a result of that, a few years later, in 2017, that's when the decision was taken that a football club that we believe is an important part of a community needs to be a part for the whole community, not just half the community. And so that was when the decision happened to split revenue equally between the men's side and the women's side.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there. We're going to come back to some of these things, but first I want to fill in a few blanks. Because we have an international audience and a large North American audience, I need to ask, this impact that, you know, women were not permitted to have a football club, does it hold true, you know, across US, Canada, maybe even Australia, New Zealand? The reason that I ask is because we see, or we even call football a completely different sport than the way football is perceived in Europe. So can you comment on that? And can you also comment on the fact that, you know, we weren't just excluded from playing, but I think up until recently, a lot of women weren't even encouraged to participate as a spectator of the sport, to even, you know, engage. It was like a men's club thing or a boys thing to do, to go out and watch football together, at least in American style football, you know. and watch the game. It was something that I think a lot of women, even like hockey, were not really encouraged to do until maybe in the last 10 or so years. So can you comment on that? Can you comment on the differences between the countries and how they perceive the game and the clubs?
So the ban that took place in England was very quickly replicated across the rest of Europe. So a lot of other countries around Europe started banning their women as well. I think they were all looking for a reason to stop that participation and keep the space male only. So there was definitely some impact. In terms of the different style of games, well, you're completely right that the fan base ended up, because we took away the legitimacy, we said that women were not meant to play, and that immediately pushed people outside. So yeah, in the UK, you know, it's largely male dominated audiences that go to the big, to most football grounds in and around the country. It's one thing that I think is different in North America, maybe because soccer is not the biggest sport in the US. So it's almost, there's so much focus on some of the other sports that I think women have been allowed to just take over with soccer and push soccer and create a fan base around it. But football in England is so ingrained in our culture that it's much harder to have space for women's sport to grow, for women's football to grow, because the impact on culture is in everyone's day-to-day life here. Maybe in the way that some of the other sports, like football or like baseball in the US might be a little bit more predominant in the everyday psyche
they had histories too in those sports where they didn't want women in. And it almost seems like in the case here of FC Lewes, that it's almost paralleling the entire feminist movement and even the time frame, you know, and it's very interesting from a historic perspective to see that. What else I wanted to talk about is like what attracted you to this game, because you yourself were a player, and like what attracted you, and what do you think today also attracts other women to be players as well as spectators, and even you mentioned to a certain extent investors, right? Because you have a non-for-profit system where you have a buy-in of the public buying in. What do you think is the allure?
So on my personal attraction to football, when I was growing up, I was always the kid that put up my hand for any sport. But football only came around maybe once a year for girls. My brothers were playing all the time and I would play in the garden with them. But the one time a year when I was allowed to play, I was like, this is it. Because I was able to get physical. I was able to like use my body. I was able to get a bit more aggressive maybe. Whereas in all the girls' sports that I was allowed to play, such as netball, which isn't very common, I don't think, in North America, you're not allowed to touch anyone. You have to stay, you know, a couple of meters away from each other. It's a very good game for a pandemic. But, you know, I was kind of much more physical and wanted to be more involved. Same, sometimes I was pushed towards dance or trampolining or badminton. But for me, there's a massive thing about team sports. I think that boys, whether they like it or not, they have to play football. And as a result, they get access to some of the benefits of team sports that maybe we don't open up to girls. So team sports for me demands commitment and dedication, and also working with people you don't really like. You have to do that in a team sport. You can't be friends with everyone, but you can't also not work with them. You have to learn how to collaborate with them. So I think as I've got older, I've realized that some of my traits or some of the skills that I use day to day have probably come from my team sports background and from playing football.
Okay, so that might be another reason sort of why other women are attracted to it today, especially since more and more women are taking positions of power in business and corporate. And like you said, these skill sets that you acquire are somewhat, I guess, comparable to having also the connections, which I think the only other way you could get those kind of connections would be from maybe your university affiliation. But yes, you're right. Those skills do have a way of taking you further in life, right? In CEO roles. Well, you're a CEO, you're a female CEO. What's it like to be a a female CEO in a male dominated arena?
Day to day. So we've created a really strong culture at Lewes where it's never really remarked on. The gender doesn't really play a role as such in the way that I work at the club. In fact, it's sometimes when I leave the club that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a woman, right? So sometimes there are funny things that will happen. We had a TV crew that came to interview me here at the club, and I let them in and showed them around and introduced them and asked them if they wanted a cup of tea. And the cameraman said to me, oh, no, please leave us alone. We're meeting the CEO shortly. And I just paused.
Really? That's interesting.
And I was like, I'm the CEO. And there was a bit of embarrassment, but that happens, that kind of thing happens from time to time when maybe someone thinks that I'm the partner of a player, or that do you know what I mean? Like those kinds of things happen a lot, but I don't mind that because it is still unusual for a woman to have a senior role in a football club. But I actually think there's loads of positives. I think that when I'm in a board meeting, I feel like I can see relationship tensions, or I can understand some of the things behind the scenes, maybe because of soft skills that I've developed that maybe I can't put on a CV saying, I'm great at understanding when people don't feel valued. But I think there is something that I can spot and see, which might be deemed to be more of a female characteristic, or traditionally or stereotypically. So I think that there's but essentially there's real benefit in having a really mixed group of people, and the people that I work with, it's very, very diverse, and that's really important. I think that collectively we make good decisions because we're thinking from different perspectives. If we all looked the same, if we all had the same background, we would make decisions that would benefit people from our own background. For a club that is so ingrained in the community, we have to be thinking with lots of different perspectives.
Okay, I see that we're having a little bit of trouble with the internet connection. I just want to point that out so that we can make sure that you're understood clearly. I want to talk to you a little bit now about the club itself, and the fact that there's like so many more men's teams inducted every year to like like 430 that come into the women's teams that come in. And even just let's talk about the pay, the pay inequity. I mean, you have a whole campaign around this, and the fact that I believe I read something like was it 630 so 630 million, I guess, in pounds versus 430 something like that. For the
pay inequity?
Money? Yeah, the prize money. So, how can we, like, why are you doing it? First of all, what is the campaign about, and how can we see some why is it that there's such a big gap between what's being paid out and in prize money, what's being paid out in sports teams in general? Why is there such a big gap? Why was there a need to even get involved with this equity program that you created?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. One, we became the first club in the world to split revenue and have this equal pay.
Yeah. The first and only club, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because for us, pay is only one part of it. For us, what's really important is equal decision making, and that is so much more powerful in a way, because that allows us to modify the kit a little bit, so our men and our women play in different color shorts, because when you've got equal decision making, maybe the women don't want to wear white shorts, so they wear a different color shorts. It's everyday decisions that when you are equal, you think more about what the women want, what the men want. You don't think about the men first and then build the women in. So we play in the same ground, we have the same marketing budget. That's really important. So it's even more than pay. Now, we understand that the big clubs cannot necessarily jump to paying their male and female players the same, because the male players are being paid astronomical sums of money that actually I don't think anyone in the world should be paid that much. So we understand there's a big gulf, but there's one thing around prize money which could be equal. And that's with the Football Association. It's our governing body. They're the ones that decide how much to award to the men's teams and the women's teams for the national cup. Every team in the country takes part in this cup. But this season, if the women win the semi-final, they win £5,000. When the men win the semi-final, they win almost £1 million. That is just ridiculous. 5,000 to 1 million. That's just not. That disparity is just ridiculous, you know. And so I think that what we've been saying is we need to even this out. We need to find a way to even it out, because a lot of the time people think that men in sport made money all by themselves, like magic, you know? But no, they had huge investment from the public purse into their facilities, into their environments, into all kinds of infrastructure. Even Wembley Stadium, England's national stadium, there's so many more men's games that take place there than women's games. But that's my money as a taxpayer. So there is already a big leg up for men's sport. So I want to get rid of that idea that men magically made money all by themselves. And for another point, when the TV deals were being made around football in this country, women were still banned, or women were still only just permitted to start playing. So all those broadcast deals were just not on the table for women. They would have been on the table without the ban. So women would have been able to generate a lot more money. What we're trying to do is just focus people's minds on the idea that a governing body, if you represent your national team, if you're taking part in your national cup, there needs to be some form of equal treatment. So I think we're just trying to draw attention to that, because I think people know that the prize money is different, but when they actually hear the figures, they're like, okay, that's way too much.
No, it's astonishing. It's astonishing, the difference in the figures. And it, you know, the sad truth of it is that what you're doing here at FC Lewes is it's almost parallel to life, right? I mean, we are still seeing this type of inequity and injustice to a large extent in our social structures, in our family structures, even in our education and pay structures. As I said earlier, when we climb the corporate ladder, women hit the ceiling first. That's why many of them leave and start their own businesses, right? What I see is a modeling here, and what I also see is FC being an exemplary model of how to even all this out and to try and see women and men in an equal light. So we talked about the difference in disparity in the actual number of teams and in the amount of money that one can get in prizes. I think something else we should discuss, though, is role models. So, I mean, when we're talking about football, so by all accounts here in North America, your football is our soccer, right? Mm-hmm. And our football is something a little different. But what I'm getting at here is that in terms of role models, we see like a David Beckham, where everybody knows David Beckham. He is the product of what you're talking about, a male who had access to all these resources and the broadcasting and the sponsorship deals. Have we ever seen a woman football player out of the UK or out of Europe have the same opportunities presented, or even the same status, to achieve the same status?
I don't think that female footballers have entered the mainstream yet in Europe. There are maybe one or two former players who are now broadcasters. So somebody like Alex Scott, who used to play for Arsenal and for England and is now a TV presenter. People start to know her, but they never really saw her play when she was playing. But because she's broken in, because she's a very good commentator, because she's a very good broadcaster, they start to know that there is women's football. I think that there is a change in North America. I mean, I think even if you look at the USA, the impact that the women's team have had there means that there are key players over the last 20 years. So not just the Megan Rapinoes, but also the Abby Wambachs and the Julie Foudy's going back as well. I think those players have come into the mainstream a little bit more. But even just recently, somebody asked me about a role model, and I said someone, and I referred to Megan Rapinoe, thinking that everyone in the world knew who Megan Rapinoe was these days, and there was just a blank stare on her face. So I have to be careful that I'm not in my own bubble where I see inspirational women now. I see them everywhere, but they're not necessarily into the mainstream yet.
Okay, well, I hope that changes soon. And I wanted to just give you a few more minutes to sort of bring out some other things that we have not yet covered in the interview. And one of those things is to learn more, like, where could we go to learn more about you, to learn more about the club, FC Lewes, to become even a partner, if you will, a buy-in. Where can women go to learn more about it? Even men, maybe men want to support it too.
Yeah, in fact, I think, we have a huge number of our supporters and our owners are men, because they see the football club as a different type of football. Apart from our equality stance, we also refuse to take gambling money, which other clubs are starting to take, which we think poses a bit of a threat to young people especially. And we also try to work ethically and transparently. And lots of people come to start supporting us because they don't like the amount of money and secrecy that's at the top clubs. So we definitely have a very diverse set of supporters and owners. So very, very easy, lewesfc.com. So LEWES FC.com. If you go there, you can become an owner. You can also see some of our work. And you'll see that a lot of what we do is on the pitch and a lot of what we do is off the pitch. Otherwise, we're on Instagram and we're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. I'd love us to start a TikTok channel, but that might take a little while still.
Okay, and so this was my next question as we round out the interview. What do you see for the future? What would you like to see for the future? And how do you think that you could impact other sports to sort of replicate what you're already putting in progress?
So my ultimate goal is for it to be completely normal for girls to take part in sport, whether they're good or whether they're not good. At the moment in this country, if you see a girl playing sport, it's probably because she's good. But I really want to see girls that are not very good, but still loving to play. And I want to see them in the park. I want to see them in the school playground in the same way that boys do it, without thinking about what they look like or whether they might be good or bad or screw up. So the normalization is really important for me. I want it to be totally normal for girls to be active. In terms of the sport, yeah, it's all about legitimacy. We need more visibility. We need to be normalized on the top level as well. Normalized on TV, normalize the number of fans that come to grounds to watch women's sport, so that when a family makes a decision at the weekend about where they're going or what they're doing, when they think about going to watch the game, they might be watching the women's game, not just the men's game. But there's a lot of change that needs to happen for that. Even just the algorithms on Google need to change so that they actually say what local women's games are taking place in the locality. Because even for us at Lewes, when we play big names like Liverpool, if you Google Lewes FC fixtures, it comes up with our men's games, not our women's games. So there's lots and lots of challenges that we need to unpack and act together from technology, from the business world, from the commercial world, from the football world, because ultimately it's going to take a lot of people coming together in order to make that change.
Well, it does sound like that, but it also sounds like you're well on your way to being the leader of this. And I also want to point out something, because I've been reading the banner behind you, which says equality, community owned, all that. What does that mean to you? I mean, and why did you choose to have this banner behind you today? While
yeah, so I'm in the office at the moment, but it's going through it's all being tidied up because we don't have the players in. The players are not back for a few weeks, so it's a bit of a building site at the ground right now. Yeah, I think that there's some things that we stand by, and that's being fan owned, being community oriented, having equality at the core. We're not for profit, so it's all those kind of reminders of what we stand for, so that when we make decisions, we're thinking about our core and our base and our community values first. We don't make decisions for commercial reasons alone. We're trying to do it so that we provide the best possible outcome for our communities as well.
Okay, well, I think you're doing a great job. I think there's a lot of benefit there. And I want to just have you say one more time where we can go to learn more about CF
Yeah.
Lewes.
The best place to go is to our website. So Lewes
FC Lewes,
FC,
sorry.
lewesfc.com. That's the best place to go. And otherwise, we're very vocal on Twitter, through our men's account, through our women's account. And yeah, come along and drop me a line. Find me online on Twitter as well.
Okay, well, I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing all this information with us. I want to thank you, my audience, for clicking in and joining us today. We always love to have you. And I just want to do a quick reminder of where you can find us. So you can see us watch us from the TV perspective. We are all over the internet, from YouTube to LinkedIn to Facebook to Twitter to Instagram to Pinterest, you name it, we're there, #Janette's TV. But if you would prefer to listen to our podcast side, you can find us in a lot of places too. Anchor, iHeartRadio, Apple, Buzzsprout, BuzzFeed, and the list actually goes on. For a complete listing of where to watch and hear us, please hop on over to www.janetteburke.com. You'll see the Janette's TV and Janette's TV podcast section. Just click on that section on the very top. It'll give you a full list of where you can watch us and where you can listen to us. And again, that link will be below. And once again, thank you for sharing your time with us today. This is Janette Burke, your host, signing off. And until next time, continue to be fabulous.